my parents are from Bolivia. We moved here when my mom remarried my dad, who is from Bogota, Colombia. So yeah, so a little bit like instilled Colombian in me. I mean, that's the only team I really go for these days. Pero when I immigrated here, the fun fact about me is my whole family only called me Ignacio. So that's how I was raised, Ignacio, because my dad, my biological father, his name is Carlos, so they would just our tradition was to actually call you by your middle name. So great. When I moved here to the States and I went to my first DC school, my teacher couldn't pronounce my name. She had a difficulty, and then she saw the attendance board. She's like, oh, your first name is Carlos. I'll just call you Carlos. So with me and my parents, we didn't really get it, and that's just where I started that switch of creating two different identities. So when I went to school, when I went to work, and all of that, for the first 18 years of my life was all Carlos, really. And then when I was home, I was Ignacio. It's not until I was about 20 years old, after a couple years in college, that I started reclaiming my identity, seeing sort of its power, but still afraid of what it was. I was like, okay, my friends, I started letting them know, hey, can you actually call me just Ignacio, to my best friends. It was not even my friends, just my best friends. Can you just please call me Ignacio? I think we're gonna be friends for a really long time. So my best friends were starting to call me Ignacio, and it's not until about 2 years ago that I decided to reincorporate Ignacio into my professional life. So everywhere I go now, it's Carlos Ignacio. So feel free to call me whatever you want. Carlos Ignacio, whatever you want. But it was why, right? It was a few years ago when I realized the rooms I was being put into. It was a few years ago that I realized I was sometimes either the youngest person in the room at this level, sometimes I was the only Hispano in the room, sometimes I was the only person of color in the room. And at first it's intimidating, right? You want to assimilate, you want to blend in, you want to make sure that, okay, I'm earning my spot, I'm just blessed to be here, grateful to be here, to be included. I'm not going to make any changes, I'm not going to push. But it was not until I saw a couple things being built out where I was we're not represented. Where I'm not saying language is not being thought out of. Specifically a program that, there was a company working on K-12 initiatives. Yes, we're going to target Hispanic families, great. I was like, how about the parents? Most of their parents don't speak English. No one had thought about that. And in that moment is when I first realized we need to speak up. When it comes to identity, sometimes it takes us time to realize who we are and what our role is and what our purpose is. The reason I love this month, especially coming to Antonio's events and the team's events, is because it really feels like a big family reunion for most of us, where we get to see each other, celebrate each other, hug each other, be like, oh my gosh, I see what you've done in the last year, we need to catch up, we only have a week in DC together, let's do it. But it's really a moment to admire each other, celebrate each other, or remind each other of why we're doing this. It's doing it for us, but it's doing it to what someone else just said earlier today, it's for a younger us, right? Creating pathways for them. So, especially in the time where we are now, leading up to an election that can decide many things for our communities across the country, and its ramifications across the world, really, and specifically in our countries back home that look up to the US. We can't stay silent anymore. Claim your identity, claim who you are,